Greetings adventurers, and welcome to the Gecko Guild. I'm your resourceful guild leader, Saren the Adventure Gecko, and it is my sworn duty to prepare our members, all of you, for your arduous journeys to come. Today we will be returning to the treacherous realms of Dead by Daylight. In our previous video we discussed the skills that are necessary to succeed as a brand new killer. So if you're interested in becoming a murderous champion of the entity, go and explore that video. Today, however, I will be instructing our brand new survivors on the basics of survival in Dead by Daylight. For those of you who wish to escape the entity's grasp and survive against all odds, this video will teach you the fundamental knowledge necessary for such a task. This is a beginner's guide to the survivor role in Dead by Daylight. Let's begin, shall we? Before anything else, it's absolutely necessary to discuss your primary objective as a survivor and the opposing objective of the killer. As a survivor, everything that you do is to work towards aiding your fellow survivors in repairing 5 of the 7 generators in a trial to power the exit gates and escape with your lives. In opposition to this, the killer will do everything in their power to prevent your escape so they can sacrifice you to the entity. These two opposing objectives define the entire gameplay experience of Dead by Daylight, because both the survivors and the killer will try to buy themselves time and waste their opponent's time to complete their objective during a trial. Therefore, every action you take in Dead by Daylight is about time. Keep this in mind for the remainder of this video. Now, before you hop into a game, I highly suggest going through the survivor tutorial and the game manual. The info here is extremely simple, but it will give you important starting knowledge about your role. Once you've done that, choose a survivor that sparks your interest and queue up for a trial. Just like in the beginner killer guide, I'm going to suggest that you shouldn't worry too much about perks, items, or add-ons at this stage of the game, and try to focus on the fundamentals. As you gain experience, these will become more relevant, but at this stage, all the theory crafting in the world won't make you better. Once you're in a trial, you will quickly learn that there isn't a neat gameplay cycle like there is for the killer. Instead, each action you take in a survivor trial has a priority, and these priorities shift depending on the circumstances of the trial. At a basic level, every survivor game will consist of actions such as repairing generators, evading the killer and chases for as long as possible, and healing and saving other survivors. Generally speaking, every trial will begin with repairing a generator, so let's start there. Once you load into the trial, you will likely be with at least one other survivor. You can either stay with the other survivors and hop on the closest generator together as soon as possible, or you can split from the group and go to a different generator. There are benefits and downsides to both of these options. The benefit of sticking with the group is that generators can be repaired a lot faster when multiple people are working on the same one. But it also means that you're all neatly grouped up for the killer, which can be very dangerous. My suggestion is to split up and pressure multiple generators at once. This will mean that even if the killer finds one of you and stops progress on one of the generators, there are up to 3 other generators being repaired at the same time. The killer can only ever chase one survivor at a time, so this makes their job very difficult. However, this doesn't mean that you should let down your guard. Be careful while repairing generators. Not only do repairs make a lot of noise, but the generator itself will become louder as the pistons begin to fire. This indicates its progress. The killer can listen for this to try and track you and the other survivors. Furthermore, you'll periodically receive skill checks which you'll be warned about with an audio cue that sounds like this. Soon after, you'll have to do a small QuickTime event and press space when the arrow is inside the appropriate area. If you time this correctly, nothing bad will happen. But if you fail or miss the skill check, the generator will explode and lose progress, and immediately alert the killer of your location. However, if you're able to time it perfectly and get your arrow in the small white area, then the generator will gain extra progress as a reward. A really solid general rule to follow is that if nothing else is happening in the game, or if another survivor is running the killer and keeping them occupied, then all the other survivors should be prioritizing repairing the generators. However, your priorities will shift if the killer finds you. To prevent that from happening for as long as possible, you should be aware of the methods the killer will use to track you down. First of all, you should avoid sprinting near the killer. While you can't see them, as you sprint you will leave bright red scratch marks on surfaces behind you that fade over 8 seconds. The killer can follow these to find you. Second of all, there are wild crows spread across the map that you can startle as you run past them. These crows are servants of the entity, and they will caw an annoyance and fly into the air when disturbed, which may alert the killer of your location. And third, many of the actions you take as a survivor make noise. Repairing, healing, opening chest, cleansing totems, going into lockers, etc. So how do you tell if the killer is close to you? The easiest way to tell without simply looking is to listen for a heartbeat and music that will rise in intensity as the killer draws near. This is called the killer's terror radius. Depending on the killer, the terror radius will either be very large, making it tough to determine exactly how close they are, or very small, giving very little time or warning to react once you hear it. A few killers can even hide their terror radius entirely with their power, so at the end of the day, your most reliable asset is your eyes. You won't be able to avoid the killer forever, however, and eventually they will start to chase you. Obviously, evading the killer becomes your top priority in this situation. A lot of new survivors are terrified of getting into a chase with a killer, but instead, I want to encourage you to think about chases as an opportunity to waste as much of the killer's time as possible. Remember, there is only one killer and 4 survivors, and the killer can only ever chase one of you at a time. The longer you're able to run the killer, the more time you give your team to repair generators and complete other objectives. In my opinion, learning how to run the killer is the single most important skill in the game for survivors to learn. There's just one major issue. The survivors are slower than the killer, so how do you evade their grasp? Fret not, you have multiple tools at your disposal to make the killer's job a living hell. The first and most common of these tools are pallets that are strategically placed between obstacles on the map, creating what is known by the community as a pallet loop. As you run past a pallet, you can drop it to either stun the killer or block their path. Doing this will force the killer to make a decision. They can either run around the pallet and try to catch you on the other side, or they can break the pallet and remove it from the game entirely. If the killer decides to run around the loop, you can continue to play the pallet and vault over it when the killer closes distance on you to extend the chase and waste more of their time. And if they decide to break the pallet, this will give you time to run to a new loop and start the process all over again. On some loops, particularly in buildings and jungle gyms, you will also find windows. You can vault through these windows to avoid the killer and extend chases, though the entity will block the window after you've vaulted it 3 times, forcing you to come up with a new plan. You can also hide in lockers, which are most commonly found in buildings and jungle gyms as well. But this can be very dangerous, and generally I don't recommend it unless you're running very specific perks. The reason for this is that getting found in a locker will instantly put you into a dying state, which we'll discuss later. A lot of new survivors overuse lockers when they first start, and hide in them for most of the game. But in my opinion, you should prioritize learning how to loop the killer and take chases instead. Unless you're extremely lucky, the killer will eventually catch up to you and get hits on you. When this happens, it does a couple things. First, getting hit gives you a large speed boost, which will allow you to get to a new loop, and second, it will cause you to bleed and groan in pain, making it much easier for the killer to track you down. If you get hit a second time, this will put you into a dying state on the ground, where you'll start to get a timer to indicate that you're bleeding out. While on the ground, you will be able to slowly recover or crawl away. You won't be able to recover fully while on the ground, however, but it does make it far easier for a survivor to come and save you if you're almost fully recovered on your own. Because of this, I recommend trying to recover over trying to crawl away, because if the killer is paying any attention at all, you won't be able to get away from them. Unfortunately, the likelihood is that the killer is just going to pick you up immediately and take you to the nearest hook to be sacrificed to the entity before a teammate is able to pick you up off the ground. While the killer is carrying you, you will be able to struggle in their grasp to try and escape. If you're able to fill the struggle meter entirely, you will break free from their grasp, which will stun them and give you an opportunity to try and run away. When you are hooked by the killer, you will enter the first stage of sacrifice and have a health bar appear under your name in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen that acts as a timer. If left on the hook, at 50% on this timer, you will enter the next stage of sacrifice and have to struggle against the entity to survive. At 0%, you will lose this struggle against the entity and die. Ideally, your fellow survivors will save you from the hook before you enter the next stage of sacrifice. But keep in mind that each time you are thrown back onto the hook by the killer, it will force you into the next stage of sacrifice. The best way to think about this is that you have 3 lives, and each time you are hooked or enter the next stage of sacrifice by being left on the hook, you will lose one of your lives. Hopefully this all highlights the importance of saving each other from the hook, because if one of your friends is hooked and you aren't being chased by the killer, then your top priority is to go and save your friend. Do not, under any circumstance, assume that someone else will save them from the hook. If everyone else makes that assumption, your friend will die on the hook, and it's a lot harder to repair the generators and evade the killer with 3 survivors instead of the full 4. Even if 2 of you go for the save, then at least that means there's an extra survivor there to either distract the killer or help quickly heal your injured friend. Speaking of healing, if you come across an injured friend, you can take the time to heal them, or if you're injured, then that friend could heal you. Healing takes time, and depending on the killer, it can either be really helpful or a total waste of time. If you're able to survive long enough to repair 5 generators, then the last thing that you need to do to accomplish your primary objective is to power the exit gates and escape the match. This is called the endgame, and if you make it this far, it's likely that at least a couple of you will be able to escape. However, sometimes you may find yourself alone because the killer sacrificed all your friends. This may seem like a hopeless situation, but you have one last chance of escape, called the hatch. If you are the only survivor remaining in a trial, then the hatch will automatically open, and if you can find it before the killer, you can jump through and live to see another day. On the other hand, if the killer finds the hatch first, they can close it, but this will immediately repair any remaining generators on the map and give you one final opportunity to power one of the 2 exit gates and escape the trial. If you manage to escape the trial, congratulations. You've denied the entity its meal, for now at least. At this point, you should have all the tools at your disposal to enter your first trials as a survivor. I wish you luck in your encounters with the murderous champions of the entity. Remember, this guide is meant to be a starting point for brand new survivors. As you rank up and go against more experienced killers, you'll have to adapt and be flexible to succeed. As such, I'll be making more survivor guides in the future to go over more advanced strategies you can utilize to evade the killer at higher ranks. Until then, be sure to come hang out with the rest of the Gecko Guild over on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/arcadeashlyn. You can often find me playing Survivor either on my own or with friends, and I'm happy to offer my insight to help you improve at the game. I also wanted to give you all a heads up that soon I will be rebranding my Twitch channel to TheGeckoGuild to match with this channel. I'm still working on getting all the assets together to make that happen, but expect the change to come sometime soon. I also have a Discord community called The Arcade, which will also be rebranded to The Gecko Guild very, very soon. The links for both are in the description. If you enjoyed today's video and found it helpful, then please consider subscribing for more content just like this. And if you have any questions that I missed or didn't cover in the video, be sure to leave a comment. Farewell everyone, I will see you in my next video, and I wish you well on your next glorious Gecko adventure.